Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me here today. I'm delighted to be here. It's, I talk to a lot of people in Ottawa each and every week that I'm up there, but I often don't get to talk to younger people who are politically engaged and who are interested in politics. So it's actually, I like doing this kind of stuff. It's stimulating. It's a good interchange of ideas. So thank you very much for coming out to talk about politics. Now I think we have about an hour and a half or so. So what I'll do is I'll just talk for 10 minutes or so about a couple of topics, and then let's have a free-ranging discussion on anything you want to talk about. Nothing's off topic. If you've got a particular area of interest, I'm happy to have a chat. So that'll give us a good hour or so to have a full discussion about the things that you as young citizens, young Canadians are interested in. So today I thought I'd talk about what I've been doing recently in Ottawa. I introduced a motion last spring, so just under a year ago, to reform Parliament, to reform a particular question period, in order to introduce greater democracy into the House of Commons. And I want to tell you why I did that. The reason's simple. I think that the trends are clear. The Canadians are increasingly becoming disconnected from their democratic institutions. In fact, in the last election, more than 4 out of 10 Canadians refused to vote. We had record low voter turnout, 59%. If you look at the statistics of each and every general election that's been held in Canada since 1867, the trend lines have been clear in the last 20 years, and especially in the last election. And I think we've got to, as parliamentarians, give pause to this issue, because when we start hitting the mid to low 50s in voter turnout, the very legitimacy of our democratic institutions to act on behalf of the people, to affect decisions, and to project authority starts to be diminished. And I think we as parliamentarians need to take a step back and ask ourselves, why are voters disconnecting from the political process? Why are they not engaged? Because Parliament is an incredibly important institution. Canada is the third oldest democracy in the world. Third oldest continuous democracy after the United States and the United Kingdom. And it's our democratic institutions at the heart of our society that have allowed us to live the kind of lives that we do, that have allowed the kind of civil peace that we've had for the better part of almost 200 years, that have allowed our economy to grow and flourish and to be one of the most prosperous societies on the face of this planet. At the heart of those realities, the reality of prosperity, the reality of peace in Canada has been our democratic institutions. And that is something that I fundamentally believe in. Certainly, the private sector and civil society do their part, but at the foundational level, it is democratic institutions, the way we have all collectively agreed to come together to govern ourselves, that are the foundation, the base for this prosperity and this peace. So, when our democratic institutions start to weaken because of low voter turnout, low voter engagement, I think we should be worried about the implications that has for future policy making, for the future legitimacy of Parliament to act on behalf of Canadians, especially in times like these. So what is fundamentally the gap between Parliament and Canadians? Why are Canadians feeling disconnected from their democratic institutions? And I think that the reason for that can be summarized in one way. They don't see themselves and their issues being discussed in the House of Commons. They don't see the relevancy of a lot of what we debate in the House of Commons as relevant to their day-to-day lives. Canadians are becoming increasingly apolitical, and there's plenty of empirical data to show this. They are becoming disconnected from the political party system. Voter commitment to particular political parties is on the decline. Membership in political parties is on the decline. And that's not just true in Canada, that's true across the Western world. That's true in the United States, it's true in Europe. If you look at the US at the border, the number of independent voters, registered independents, has risen significantly in recent years. The number of registered Democrats and Republicans has declined as a percentage of the voter base. So this is not unique to Canada. But what we need to do as Canadians in our context is figure out how we can further engage the public. And I think the House of Commons is the place we should start. Often what we debate each and every day during question period are issues that Canadians are not preoccupied with. I'll give you one example. About a year ago, the big debate that raged on for months in the House of Commons during question period was the issue of Afghan detainees. Now, setting aside the rightness and the wrongness of both the government and the opposition's positions on this issue, I can tell you that this was not even a top 5 issue in my riding and in the vast majority of ridings across the country. This was, in some ways, an Ottawa-manufactured controversy. This was something that preoccupied people in Ottawa and the bureaucracy and the political elites in Ottawa, and to a certain extent, the media. But this was not something that ordinary Canadians were at all concerned about. So that was an example of a disconnect between what was being debated in Parliament and what Canadians cared about. So when I thought about restoring people's faith in their democratic institutions, I believe that has to start with giving MPs the ability to be able to better represent their constituents by asking questions relevant to their constituents in the House of Commons of the government. And so that really is the heart of the motion. The media has focused in particular on the part of the motion that calls for greater decorum and civility in the House. That is certainly a part of it, but the heart of the motion is to restore the right of individual members of Parliament to represent their constituents and ask questions of the government. It may shock you to find out that MPs do not have the right to ask questions of the government. That right was taken away in the early 1980s. For decades, to the 1980s, members could rise in the House without having petitioned or sanctioned approval from their party, could rise in the House and simply ask a question of the government on behalf of their constituents or on whatever issue they thought was of concern to the people that they represent. That right was taken away in the early 1980s. And today, the only way that a member can ask a question in the House is if their party approves their name on the list. And we are the only Westminster democracy to have that system in place. And so the heart of my motion is to restore democracy by restoring the right of members to ask questions on behalf of their constituents, questions that will be driven not by what the national media headlines are, not by what the parties want the headlines to be, but rather by what individual members hear back in their home ridings, issues of concern to local people that will then get play in the House of Commons. So this is really about tackling a very small part of the overall system. It's also a small step, a small but important first step of trying to rebalance the power of the leadership of the 4 parties, and in particular the executive branch of government, with the power of individual MPs to better represent their constituents, to better have autonomy in the House. Now, I'm a firm believer in our parliamentary system of government. I don't believe in proportional representation. And I'm a strong believer in the party system. Parliament can't work without parties. Parties provide the structure under which Parliament operates. Without the party structure, it would be complete chaos. So you need a party system. But I believe that the parties, all 4 parties in the House, have over the last 3-4 decades consistently advanced their power to the detriment of individual MPs within their caucuses. And so now we have a system where almost all of the power of the House and its institutions is vested in the 4 leaders' offices. And individual MPs have very little autonomy and authority to act within that system to affect change. And I think we need to rebalance the system by restoring some of the rights that members used to have to represent their constituents and to be those diverse voices in the system. And I think by doing that, we will restore Canadians' faith that when they contact their local representative, the person that they checked their name off on the ballot for in the last election, that actually means something, and that person will actually be able to have a little slice of a say in how our institutions are run and how decisions are taken in Ottawa. So that's what I've been doing in the last year or so. It's been rewarding because when I first introduced this, I thought this would be just something for debate for 308 members of Parliament, and I was surprised at how many young people, how many people across the country became very interested in this issue. I never thought that Canadians across the country had any interest in standing orders or other unwritten conventions of Parliament, and so it's been a pleasant surprise to see that Canadians actually do care about their democratic institutions. They may not be happy with them, they may be showing their disapproval with the way in which Parliament is run today by not turning out to vote, but nevertheless, they are deeply interested and deeply involved in debates about how we can change it. So, before I open up the floor to questions, I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me here today. I'm an Ontario MP, so I'm from the other side of Toronto. I grew up in a small town called Fergus, Ontario, where I live right now with my Patrick Beatty's from Fergus as well, where his parents were. I live there with my wife and 3 kids, and it's been a 7-year journey that I've been on as a member of Parliament. I've enjoyed each and every minute of it. It's a real honor as a first-generation Canadian to sit in that chamber and to be able to participate in democracy. I think it's a real tribute to Canadian society that we have a society, a country where someone like me, firstborn son of 2 immigrants, could actually achieve elected office in this country. I think it speaks to the openness, the generosity, and the upward mobility of our society. I think it's something that we all can be very, very proud of. So thank you very much, and delighted to take any questions that you might have.